Yes, guys, week 1 of fantasy football is in the books, and we have a ton of players to trade for. I'm giving you 10 total trade targets today, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers. So we will begin with more of an obvious one, and that is Jahmyr Gibbs at the running back position. A lot of people don't think he's a buy right now. I disagree. I'm going to tell you why. But before we get into that, I want to just kind of give a general note, right? Something that is obvious, maybe doesn't need to be said, but whenever there is a general feeling of trending down towards a top 5, top 6, top 7 pick, Ja'Marr Chase right now, for example, after dropping 4 points or whatever he scored, that's a window. Jahmyr Gibbs, the Lions looking how they looked, right? That is a window into these players that, for most people, you're not able to draft these players in fantasy football, okay? So whenever that's the case, you got to get in. 2 years ago, if you guys remember, CeeDee Lamb, the first 6-7 weeks, whatever it was with Dak when they were not playing well, then went on to basically set fantasy football records, those two, okay? It was one of the best stacks ever. If you got in on Lamb, that paid off. Okay, so let's talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. Like I said, a lot of people are very down on the Lions. I am down on parts of the Lions. I think that Jameson Williams, David Montgomery, for example, are trending in the wrong direction, whereas Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown are so good individually. And if the offense and the lack of Ben Johnson and Jared Goff exposed, right, cannot support the surrounding pieces, Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, because of how good they are, one-on-one, individually, as a player, right, they are going to still be fine. Whereas Jameson Williams, he benefits a lot from big plays. He benefits a lot from jet sweeps, design plays, things like that, where a lot of that works when the defense isn't expecting it, okay? Same thing with David Montgomery, but in a different fashion. He benefits a lot from layup touchdowns. And if the offense isn't as good, they're not going to be inside the 5 as much. You never know, right? So in terms of Gibbs, I just want to remind you guys what we're talking about here with Gibbs. Last year, okay, he scored the most total weeks 1 through 18 PPR fantasy points. More than Saquon Barkley, more than literally any running back, I should say. He scored the most running back total PPR fantasy points, right? 1.2 PPR fantasy points per touch. When we look at recent running back ones who finished running back 1, okay? Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs last year, 1.2. Only Alvin Kamara, going back to 2018, had a higher fantasy points per touch. He was at 1.4. That is insane. CMC, 1.15. Eckler, 1.19. Taylor wasn't even at 1 point, 0.99. Kamara, like I said, 1.4 in 2020. CMC, 1.17. And Barkley, 1.08. So among the best running backs in fantasy, Gibbs is better than basically all of them, besides Kamara, for the last 7 years in terms of scoring fantasy points per touch. And how did Kamara score 1.4 fantasy points per touch? A lot like this, okay? Jahmyr Gibbs, 10 targets in week 1. He is absolutely bulletproof for fantasy. This floor that we're seeing confirms that he has a very good shot to repeat as total point PPR RB1, has a very good shot to be the best running back in fantasy on a points per game basis, because even when the offense looks the worst they've looked since the team was 0-17, right? 15 PPR fantasy points just out of nowhere. I mean, it is not a lot of people are talking about this, and I really see a window into grabbing Jahmyr Gibbs. You can go into trade-offs, just be like, dude, they're still splitting. Monty, send them the splits from the first half when it was competitive. Look, they're still splitting. The offense doesn't look good. Goff looks bad. You might be able to get Gibbs for kind of a more lower end running back 1. And that is the Gibbs discussion. The same thing kind of applies for Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can probably walk in there with a Garrett Wilson, maybe, a Lad McConkey. And I actually like those players a lot. We might talk about one of them later. But they are not Amon-Ra St. Brown, okay? Let's move on to our next running back here. And yeah, it's going to be Travis Etienne. Now, these trade targets, right? Trade targets is not necessarily a instant buy low, right? So for Gibbs, sure, maybe it was a bit of a buy low. Sometimes trade target and buy low go together. For Etienne, that is not the case. This is not necessarily a buy high, but it's not a buy low. It's a buy the trend upwards. Get on the ride here with Travis Etienne. So 19 opportunities in week 1. As you guys know, 10 out of the top 12 running backs last year averaged 18 plus opportunities. So anytime we're seeing 18 plus opportunities for a running back, it's part of the reason I'm so in on Javonte right now, just after week 1, right? Not alarm bells, but you got to raise an eyebrow and be like, should I be in? Now, with Etienne, I fully expected a 50-50 split here this year between Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, but Etienne has won the job. Now, going back to, 2022, 3, right? Etienne's been my guy. I love this guy. Was in on him. He was my guy for that RB3 overall season. Told you guys to draft him in the first round last year. That didn't work out, but we are back, okay? We look at the career log for Etienne, former first rounder, literally the best ACC Clemson running back of all time. Insane in college. Excels in space, excels in this exact system that Liam Cohen is implementing. Finished RB6 on the week, but, over 1,400 yards in his first 2 seasons here, 2022 and 2023. So both seasons he's played 17 games, and there's been no shenanigans, if you will, going on like there was in 2024. The season the coach got fired. Over 1,400 yards, RB17 and then RB3 in 2023. Already starting this season as a upper half RB1. And this is part of the reason we were all over him in the 9th round, because the ceiling was very realistic. Now, the schedule isn't great. After Cincinnati, you have Houston, San Fran, KC, Seattle, which is a tough defense, then the Rams. So the schedule is not awesome. And then looking at the playoffs, Jets, Denver, could be better. We don't like Denver. We don't like at Denver. But with Etienne, guys, if we look last year, okay, at Bucky Irving. Now, Bucky Irving and Rachaad White were both top 12 running backs on a points per game basis. So that's why I was so excited about Etienne and Bigsby. I was like, it doesn't really matter who wins the job, because I don't think either will. Turns out Etienne won. That's cool. But both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving were top 12 running backs on a points per game basis, in fantasy points per touch. That metric we were talking about with Gibbs. Gibbs was number 1. Both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving were in the top 12 in Liam Cohen's offense. So, like I said, expected Bigsby and Etienne to just kind of take that over. Now, Bucky Irving last year, when he kind of emerged here, 18.3 fantasy points, 19 plus opportunities, and he was RB6 overall, just like where Etienne is right now, on only 50% of snaps. So when we go back to Etienne and see 61% of snaps, which, by the way, they kind of pulled him for the 4th quarter. You saw Tootin, you saw Bigsby, you saw LaQuint Allen Jr. was actually the first running back to split with Travis. This number, honestly, should be 65 in week 2, dare I say pushing 70. We go back to 2023, RB3 overall. We're seeing 80% of snaps here. But later in the season, 61%, 66, 62, 62. And in these games were not as good, but still decent. Here's 25 points in week 17 against Carolina, coincidentally, and a bit of a lower floor in some of these, but again, 12.6 points, 17.9, 17.2, 9.9, 6.1. So he's done it before on those limited snaps, and this is not in a Liam Cohen offense. Okay, so Etienne is a buy. You can trade in guys like DeAndre Swift for Etienne, who is also rising in the rankings, also a bit of a trade target himself, in my opinion, but Etienne has the ability to finish really in that top 10 if he maintains 60 to 70, pushes for 80% of snaps on a good week. In this offense, we got to be very excited. Get on the ride. You can get him as your RB2, and I would do so. Now, speaking of Bucky Irving, for the exact reason I just said last year, all right, 19 plus opportunities per game, 18.3 fantasy points per game. This is, again, the back half of last season, weeks 10 through 18, and RB6 overall. And here's the key number, 50% of snaps. Week 1 for Bucky, my question with Bucky was, can he push 70% of snaps? In week 1, ran right through that wall, essentially 76% of snaps, 18 opportunities, alarm bells going off every time we see that for a running back. We really want that. And he handled the workload great. Now, 2.6 yards per carry, not great. Atlanta's defense is pretty decent. Caught all 4 targets. This is a buy low for me, okay? This stat line is a buy low. We've already seen last year he was a top 5 running back, top 6 running back to close the season. All right, second-year running back, same old offense. Obviously, Liam Cohen's gone. It kind of more affects Baker Mayfield and the pass catchers. I think this confirms the RB1 overall upside. I think you can roll in with a Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, dare I say, Devon Etienne, and cash them in for a Bucky Irving. And that is what we are looking to do. Obviously, you buy Bucky Irving. Obviously, he's a trade for. But this workload confirms, this snap percentage confirms he can do it, and it unlocks the RB1 overall ceiling, which now he's not being valued as that yet in drafts because 14.5 fantasy points, I don't even know if that's top 10. I don't think it is, right? If he got in the end zone a couple times here, whatever, we're looking at close to 30 points. It's over. Yeah, it's over. He's probably ranked top 5 this week. He's not yet, so get in now. Okay, next up, Chase Brown. A lot of studs on the list, but early, I'm stumbling, but early in the season is when these studs become available because Chase Brown's going to fix this. He's going to fix this in week 2, week 3, whatever. Started off the game extremely hot. 7 rushes on the ground, 8 opportunities for the first drive of the game this past Sunday. Got in the end zone. And then all of a sudden, the entire offense just stopped working. They only scored 17 points or whatever it was. We look at Chase Brown last year, okay? As the Cincinnati running back won 25 plus total opportunities per game. What did he have this game? 24. 85% plus snaps played, 75 in this game. Great. 20.6 PPR points per game. And that is the difference. We're only seeing 13.1 in week 1. Fantasy RB3, certainly not top 3 this week. In 2025, quoted this offseason as saying, safety valve for Burrow, focal point of the offense. That is correct. We didn't see the targets go up as much, but again, still top 3 ceiling at the RB position, and you got to get in now because Jacksonville, Minnesota, Denver, this is where we're going to see the targets go up. For a guy like Chase Brown against Denver, in the Bengals offense, that's actually like a shootout, right? Where we look at Etienne, they can go play Denver and lose the game pretty easily, but with the Bengals, always in these games, shootout potential every game. Same thing with Minnesota, another tough defense, and that's just how it is. You got to get Chase Brown, or at least offer. Another guy who's, I shouldn't say another, but the next running back who's probably a bit easier to obtain is Trevian Henderson. Actually had the most opportunities on the team, 11 opportunities, 5 rushes, 6 targets. Ramondre Stevenson had 10. Stevenson played 65% of the snaps. Henderson played the other 35% of the snaps. They came out after the game, Vrabel, and said they got to get him in more space, right, in the post-game interview. Doesn't necessarily mean they got to get him more work, but they acknowledged that they maybe did not use Henderson to his full capabilities in this game. And as fantasy players, that's cool. That's cool with us. Advise not starting Henderson and advise not starting a lot of rookies in week 1 at the RB position because as much as we hate it, these veterans who we don't like for fantasy, we continue to not like them when they steal work from our rookies. But Miami in week 2, Pittsburgh if he can survive that, and then we got Carolina, Buffalo, New Orleans, Tennessee, all the way through week 7 for Trevian Henderson. And this is where it could start to get scary here. Weeks 4 through 7. These 4 games here, Carolina, Buffalo, New Orleans, Tennessee, already got the most opportunities. 6 targets, guys, at the RB position. There are some receivers that we drafted in the top 4 rounds that did not see that number, and they play receiver. And they are not Trevian Henderson on the ground. So definitely knock on the door. Some guys I would trade for him. Aaron Jones is like a great example of who to send away. J.K. Dobbins, maybe R.J. Harvey, right? Let's transition into the wide receivers. The first one, teased this a little bit before, but it is Lad McConkey. And if we look at Justin Herbert, let's just go do that real quick. Let's look at him and Quentin Johnston. And who else caught a touchdown this week? Keenan Allen did. Okay. So Justin Herbert, this past week, 3 touchdowns, 34 pass attempts, ran the ball. Side note, he looks awesome. And then we look at the wide receivers. Okay, Quentin Johnson, 5 catches, 2 tutties. Keenan Allen, 7 catches, 1 tutty. And then we go to McConkey, a very casual 9 targets and no touchdowns. So the touchdowns did not go to Ladd McConkey this week, but this is the floor. 13.4 PPR points really is looking like the floor. I will remind you guys, last year he had about 190 yards, okay, in the playoffs. In their lone playoff game, he literally had like almost 40 fantasy points on yards alone. So that's the second most recent game he's played. Comes in, just walks into 9 targets. Keenan being here spreads the offense out a little bit more. He took over some slot snaps. I believe McConkey played like half of the snaps from the slot. Those are valuable. That's down a little bit from like 65%, I think it was last year. Don't quote me on those numbers. I'm not the, how do I say this, like route tree guy. It's just kind of an observation that I noticed, right? It was more of a 2/3 slot last year for McConkey. And then in that first game, I noticed it was just kind of like half the time. And maybe I'm wrong, but those were the vibes I was getting. Keenan looks great, but again, guys, 33 years old. How long is he going to do this? And he can do this all season. Keenan can go literally get 10 targets all season, go ahead and finish top 12 himself, and this guy, Ladd McConkey, will be right behind him or right in front of him as a top 10 wide receiver because of this guy, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, that was arguably the best QB performance I've seen in the last 5 years, just from a pure passing perspective. It was insane. Like he would literally just look and on a rope deliver the ball wherever he wanted with ease. Truly impressive from Herbert. I'm all in on these Chargers receivers and Herbert. You can get McConkey for like Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins. I prefer McConkey to both of them because T. Higgins' floor is way lower than McConkey's, and the ceiling, sure, T. Higgins has a bigger ceiling, but it comes with more risk, and I prefer McConkey. The next guy we'll talk about, talking about big ceilings, George Pickens, easy to acquire here, only 4 targets in week 1. What you don't see is the 2, dare I say 3, extra targets that were called back to penalties or, I was going to say pass interference, but that's a penalty. A lot of these plays called back, end zone targets that just missed, right? That 4th target that he didn't catch was an end zone shot. Pass interferences on the goal line, deep targets. CeeDee Lamb, I believe he had 13 targets. Insane. There is a world where both these guys get 9+ targets per game this season. And this was just a slow start at Philly, very Javonte heavy, very CeeDee Lamb heavy. But the offense looked good. Dak looked good. The offensive line looked good. You get the Giants, Chicago, Green Bay. The Jets, Aaron Rodgers just cooked them. So get in on Pickens now. Can get him for a wide receiver 3 price. Can get him for like a DJ Moore maybe. I do prefer Pickens in that exchange. A guy we are getting on the ride here, right? Similar to some guys we talked about before. This kind of reminds me of like the Bucky Irving of the wide receiver version of Bucky Irving here is Jaxon Smith-Njigba with 13 targets, over a 50% target share, 9 catches, 124 yards. Now 19.4 PPR points. It's kind of funny because we would expect this to be much better. But again, played the tough Niners defense. Cooper Kupp only saw 3 targets. The running backs were okay. I just see a lot of room for this offense to get better. And JSN has every skill set, just like these guys, just like Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown from the slot. He played a good amount outside this game. Obviously, Cooper Kupp's on the team now, and he just dominated. He runs around the field like he's Keenan Allen, but he's 23, and it is insane. He has top 3 overall fantasy football ceiling at the position, without a doubt. Without a doubt, and again, a lot of people don't realize that yet. So if you can go and turn your Ladd McConkey, right? You can go Garrett Wilson, Ladd McConkey, JSN in a series of trades. Those are the type of moves we're talking about. There's this gap between, how do I put this? There's this gap between Ladd McConkey, Garrett Wilson, these bottom end wide receiver 1s, those guys, and Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. And that gap is filled. Sometimes Amon-Ra goes into that latter group. Sometimes Amon-Ra drops down, right? Same thing with Nico Collins, Brian Thomas. He is in that tier. This guy is in that tier. A lot of people don't consider him to be there yet. Now, for the final 3 players, I'm giving you a bonus here. We'll round out with these next 2 wide receivers, and they're both on the same team. I'm going to actually start with Travis Hunter. So he led the team here, 8 targets, caught 6 of them for 33 yards. We were like this close from a 75-yard touchdown that probably would have broke the internet. A lot of people didn't see that. Had he caught that, I mean, we're talking over 20 fantasy points, maybe top 15 in the rankings for week 2, and it just didn't connect in the game. I believe the pass got tipped or whatever. Right at the last second. In terms of Brian Thomas, caught 1 of 7 targets. 1 of 7. And he scored a rushing touchdown. So it was nice to see them design a play to get the ball into BTJ's hands. They know how valuable he is for the team, how much of a playmaker he is. They wanted to get him the ball. Guys, Brian Thomas, 1 catch on 7 targets. I'm going to need you to go knock on the door of the office here, of the BTJ owner, and at least inquire. He is basically identical to JSN in terms of the rankings. It's where I have him right now. Travis Hunter is approaching wide receiver 2 status. He's not there yet, but he's approaching it. And the guy throwing them the ball, Trevor Lawrence, is a buy low. This was a very odd game where the Panthers kind of shot themselves in the foot. I believe there was a pick 6. They couldn't get anything going. The run game was dominating for the Jaguars. Lawrence did not look 10 out of 10 amazing, but there was also a 1 or 2 hour weather delay in the middle of this game. There was a very odd game. And I lost my matchup by 0.2 points. I wish the game was just played and allowed for these players to get into a bit of a rhythm. It wasn't, but here we go. At Cincinnati in week 2. This is a blow-up spot for the Jaguars. We just saw Joe Flacco, 45 pass attempts, almost 300 yards against the Bengals. They were at home, and I'll tell you what, Lawrence is better than Flacco with way better weapons. So I'd be kind of surprised if Lawrence isn't flirting with 300 yards himself. Now, those are the players, guys. 5 at each position, 5 RB, 5 wide receivers, 1 bonus QB. So go make the calls to these offices. Try to lock them up before they play the game in week 2. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.